start this week with very good news. The BRVM is still climbing, and this time, the advance was particularly strong. All the major indexes finished higher, trading activity accelerated sharply, and 28 stocks gained while only 19 declined. In other words, this rally was not driven by just one or two companies. Strength was spread across much of the market. Welcome to Markets Talk, the Daba Finance podcast, helping you understand what is moving African markets and, more importantly, what it could mean for your money. Let's begin with the indexes. The BRVM Composite rose 2.51% to close at 497.65 points, reaching a new high for the year. The BRVM 30 performed even better, rising 2.76% to 237.61 points. The BRVM Prestige gained 2.24%, while the BRVM Principal advanced 2.33%. Why does this matter? When several indexes rise together, the move is generally more convincing than a rally driven by only a handful of large companies. And this week, investors were also much more active. More than 172,700 shares changed hands, a 60.15% increase from the previous week. The total value traded climbed 39.58% to around 11.23 billion CFA francs. Equity market capitalization also rose 2.61% to 19 trillion CFA francs. Now, let's talk about the week's top stocks. Sicor Côte d'Ivoire dominated the rankings with a remarkable 42.27% gain, closing at 10,080 CFA franc. Since the beginning of the year, the stock has now risen more than 200%. But there is an important point to remember. Part of that volatility is linked to limited liquidity. When relatively few shares are available to buy or sell, even a small number of transactions can produce very large price movements. ERIUM Côte d'Ivoire ranked second with a 14.35% increase to 2,430 CFA francs. TotalEnergies. Marketing Côte d'Ivoire completed the top three, gaining 12.30% to 3,750 CFA franc. On the downside, CITAB Côte d'Ivoire fell 5.94% to 23,195 CFA franc. But context matters here. CITAB paid its dividend on August 13th at 1,707.2 CFA francs per share. When a stock goes ex-dividend, its price normally adjusts lower to reflect the cash that has just been distributed to shareholders. So, a decline after a dividend payment does not automatically mean that the company's fundamentals have weakened. Sonatel Burkina Faso fell 4.76%, while Loterie Nationale du Benin declined 4.65%. When it comes to liquidity, Sonatel Senegal remains one of the market's heavyweights. Nearly 1.48 billion CFA francs worth of Sonatel shares were traded during the week, representing more than 13% of total equity market activity. SOGB, Côte d'Ivoire, and Société Générale. Côte d'Ivoire were also among the most actively traded stocks. For investors, liquidity matters. A liquid stock is generally easier to buy or sell without causing a disproportionate movement in its market price. Now to bonds. Bond market capitalization edged down 0.99% to 12.91 trillion CFA francs. A total of 80,907 bonds changed hands, representing approximately 801 million CFA francs in transactions. Almost half of that activity was concentrated in a 5-year Togo government bond carrying a 6.50% coupon. 40,000 bonds from this issue were traded for 400 million CFA francs. That represented almost half of the total value traded on the bond market during the week. For investors, this shows that demand for yield in regional government debt remains significant, and the bond opportunities for the coming week reinforce that trend. Depending on the issue, yields to maturity are around 7% and can exceed 11%. For example, a 10-year CRRH UEMOA bond currently offers a yield to maturity above 11%, while several government bonds with shorter maturities are offering yields of roughly 7% to 9%. But remember, the coupon is only part of the story. Your purchase price, the time remaining until maturity, the issuer, and the credit risk all help determine your actual return. Now, a quick update on dividends. The 2026 BRVM dividend season remains very active. 35 out of 47 listed companies are currently identified as dividend payers, with an average yield of around 4.56%. Companies that have confirmed or already paid dividends this year include Servair, Nestlé Côte d'Ivoire, TotalEnergies Côte d'Ivoire, SAPH, Société Générale Côte d'Ivoire, SOGB, NSIA Bank, CITAB, and Sonatel. Some distributions have already been completed, while others are scheduled for the coming weeks. To see all payment dates, amounts, and upcoming distributions, download the Daba app and access the full dividend calendar. Beyond the BRVM, several major investment stories shaped African markets this week. In Benin, Moody's upgraded the country's sovereign rating from B1 to BA3, citing economic growth, improved fiscal management, and progress on public debt. For bond investors, a stronger sovereign rating can reduce perceived risk and potentially improve a government's future borrowing conditions. In South Africa, foreign investors returned strongly to government bonds, purchasing more than 23 billion rand on a net basis during the first week of August. A stronger rand combined with high local yields has made the market more attractive to international investors. Nigeria introduced tax incentives worth as much as $11.50 per barrel to encourage investment in deepwater oil and gas projects. The government hopes the new framework can attract as much as $50 billion in investment. Jumia also announced a $50 million equity raise, led in part by the International Finance Corporation. The company plans to strengthen its cash position while continuing its push toward operating break-even. Africa 50 secured another $50 million for the development of green infrastructure projects across the continent. And in banking, Nedbank is expanding its East African footprint through its planned acquisition of a 66% stake in Kenya's NCBA Group. So, what should investors watch next week? The broader trend remains positive, but after several strong gains, stock selection becomes even more important. The outlook shows that some shares may still offer attractive upside relative to their estimated value, while others are already trading well above analysts' target prices. In other words, simply buying whatever is going up is not enough. Investors need to distinguish between momentum, valuation, dividends, earnings quality, and long-term potential. The specific stocks we are watching and our recommendations are reserved for Daba Pro subscribers. Daba Pro gives you weekly recommendations, detailed stock analysis, exclusive data, and reduced investing fees to help you make more informed investment decisions. And if terms like bond yields, valuation, dividends, or liquidity still feel technical, Daba Academy is designed to help you build a stronger understanding of investing and wealth creation. There is currently a special offer for podcast listeners. Use code PODCAST when registering for Daba Academy to receive a 3,000 CFA franc discount. To receive weekly recommendations, access exclusive analysis, and reduce your investing fees, subscribe to Daba Pro. With Daba Pro, you do not just follow the markets, you stay ahead of them. That was your weekly market recap with Markets Talk, the podcast from Daba Finance. I'm your markets editor, always connected to the pulse of African markets. See you next time. Stay curious, stay invested.